Have you ever felt like you were fighting a battle no one else could see? Some days we wrestle with emotions, worry, frustration, sorrow, violently. Not out of fear, but because we understand. Some things grow stronger the deeper they are kept within. A Stoic knows this truth well. Not everything needs to be spoken. It's not secrecy. It's strength. True power comes not from applause, but from self-mastery. Today we'll uncover 10 truths that a true Stoic will never speak aloud. These aren't psychological tricks. They are a way of life, a path to inner freedom, a sanctuary no one can enter unless we allow them. 1. The whispers of self-doubt. Not every insecurity needs to be shared. There's a silent dialogue nearly all of us have faced. The moment we ourselves become our harshest interrogator. Questions like, am I good enough? Am I on the right path? Or, do I truly deserve this? Tend to echo in our minds at the most delicate moments, on the brink of a challenge, under the gaze of judgment, or simply on a quiet night, when everything stops except our thoughts. In today's world, we're often encouraged to express emotions, to open up about anxieties in search of empathy and comfort. But the Stoic takes a wholly different path. They don't deny the existence of self-doubt. They simply choose to face it alone, in silence. To them, it is not a matter to be debated or solved through advice, but an internal inquiry where the same soul must play both roles, the skeptic and the respondent. The Stoic knows insecurity is part of being human, a signal that we're stepping outside our comfort zone, nearing the unknown. But when exposed too early, that insecurity is easily distorted by external noise. A careless critique, a doubtful glance, or even a half-hearted encouragement can veer us off course, or worse, convince us to quit before we even begin. Instead of seeking validation from the world, the Stoic seeks confirmation within. They listen to doubt like a stern but honest mentor. They don't rush to banish it, but let it speak. Examine it. Where does this feeling come from? Is it grounded in truth? What proof is there that my fear will come to pass? If it does, what's the worst that could happen? Can I survive it? And when the answers come, not from others but from the stillness of self-inquiry, true confidence begins to take root. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic thinkers, ruled an empire. Yet rather than proclaim his worries in public, he wrote them down in a journal, meant only for himself. It wasn't the act of a weak man hiding his emotions, but of someone who understood that emotions, especially doubt, can only be mastered when we're quiet enough to hear them clearly. When faced correctly, self-doubt isn't an obstacle. On the contrary, it's an opportunity. It reminds us there's still room to grow, still lessons to learn. It keeps us humble, but doesn't paralyze us. It forces us to build inner strength, the kind that can't be borrowed, that praise can't produce, that applause can't sustain. The Stoic trains the mind to distinguish between the voice of reason and the echo of fear. They know that sometimes we must walk without approval. Sometimes we must believe in our worth before anyone else sees it. Because if we can't stand firm in the storm of our own doubts, no success outside can ever truly hold us. And when we learn to sit down, confront those whispers without needing validation, without needing applause, without chasing reaction, that's when real growth begins. 2. Steps beyond the comfort zone. The light of fortitude is forged in the dark. Stepping outside the comfort zone isn't a declaration, nor does it need to become a campaign launched across social media. It's a quiet, personal decision, formed in moments no one sees. When a person chooses the harder path, the less celebrated route, the discipline of growth, while the world sleeps, the Stoic understands that true change does not come from noise, but from silent perseverance. In a world obsessed with performance, where even the smallest step is ripe for sharing, keeping the journey private becomes a countercultural act. And yet, that very choice is a sign of profound independence. When someone walks into difficulty without seeking recognition, without craving approval, they prove that their drive comes from within, not from likes or flattery. The Stoic doesn't oppose being seen. They simply refuse to depend on it as a condition for continuing. To step into the unknown always carries the risk of failure, of judgment, of being doubted by oneself. But what makes a person strong is not how they overcome challenges in the spotlight, but how they endure when no one is watching, when no one cares. The Stoics see silence as fertile ground for self-discipline. They don't need to announce they've started eating clean, exercising, or meditating each morning. They act, repeat, and let the results speak in time. One of the greatest temptations in leaving the comfort zone is turning it into a story, to showcase one's effort as proof of growth. Yet the paradox is, the more it's told, the more easily the meaning erodes. It stops being a pure pursuit of development and begins to feed a hunger for attention. Growth is no longer the aim. It becomes a tool. The Stoic sees this clearly and chooses separation. They do not let recognition govern their reasons. This doesn't mean they reject support, but they guard the meaning of their journeys with sovereignty. Quiet perseverance is a kind of strength that's hard to see, but even harder to shake. A person might quietly learn a skill each night, train through the biting cold, write down ideas in a journal no one will read, or correct a habit no one knew was broken. These are the real steps outside the comfort zone. No declarations, no proof required. Growth comes slowly but surely, and when it arrives, it doesn't bring applause. It brings an unshakable steadiness. Stoic philosophy doesn't advocate hiding or extreme withdrawal, but it honors the cureness of what is still becoming. Just as a seed needs still earth to sprout, personal growth needs protection from curious hands, from cheap praise that could steer someone away from their original purpose. Silent consistency is a form of a discipline, and within that discipline, the Stoic seeks not to stand out, but to stand firm. Leaving the comfort zone is not a single leap meant to impress. It's a series of small, steady steps, day after day, regardless of who's watching. True maturity doesn't happen on stage. It unfolds behind the curtain, and it's there that the Stoic carves themselves. Through giant acts no one sees, that shape who they become forever. 3. Personal irritations. Complaint is the outburst of an undisciplined mind. In daily life, we often encounter countless irritations, from minor injustices, careless words, and disappointments, from those we love, to events that shake our emotional balance. The first and most common response to perceived unfairness is to complain. It gives the illusion that we're doing something, that we're pushing back, releasing tension. Yet from a Stoic perspective, complaining is usually a reflex, not a response. And rather than solving the issue, it amplifies negative emotion, weakens inner control, and makes us dependent on circumstances we do not command. The Stoic does not deny emotion. They are not numb to the world. They feel as others do, but they choose to respond in ways that do not disturb their inner peace. Complaint or outward frustration is not a sign of strength. More often, it signals a lack of self-mastery. The Stoic understands that when personal irritation is indulged, it becomes a habit, one that corrodes equilibrium. That is why they train themselves to observe emotions mindfully, to notice discomfort, but not to obey it. A core principle of Stoic thought is to distinguish between what we can control and what we cannot. The careless words of others, unexpected disruptions, or negativity from those around us. None of these lie within our direct influence. Complaining about them is no more effective than trying to control the weather. The Stoic chooses to let go of what cannot be changed, not out of resignation, but as an act of preserving mental strength. They do not allow small external disturbances to fracture the stillness within, a stillness they've spent a lifetime building. The silence of a Stoic is not indifference. It is a deliberate stance, a mark of someone who understands the power of restraint. Often, doing nothing in the face of discomfort requires more courage than reacting. To face irritation without letting it shape our speech or action, that is the mark of a disciplined mind. The Stoic does not seek to win every argument. They seek an inner victory over their impulses, over reactive anger, over the ego's craving for defense. Practicing serenity in the face of agitation does not mean doing nothing. The Stoic is not passive. They act, but only when the mind is clear and intention sharp. They are not led by emotion, but steered by reason. When a problem requires action, they move quietly, decisively. When injustice must be corrected, they choose their moment and their method, without compromising inner balance. That is why they may seem calm, but are in truth fiercely resilient. One of the deepest lessons of Stoicism is this: silence is not weakness, it is a form of maturity. When we no longer feel the need to react to every irritation, when we know what's worth confronting and what is better released, we begin to taste true freedom. Freedom from others' control, from the sway of circumstance, and from the tyranny of emotions that have yet to be trained. 4. Quiet dreams. If a dream isn't strong enough, yet don't expose it to the light. Dreams are among the most fragile parts of who we are. They're not always grand or ambitious. Sometimes they're simply the wish to live more simply, to learn a new skill, to start over in a far-off place, or to become just a little better each day. But whatever that dream may be in its early stages, when it's still soft-edged and uneasy, it is also at its most vulnerable. The Stoic understands this well. They don't nurture dreams through talk, nor do they try to validate them by exposing them too soon. Instead, they let the dream live inwardly, growing in silence, needing no recognition or permission from others. In a world where speak it into existence is loudly encouraged, the Stoic chooses instead to keep the dream in the mind until it is strong enough to resist distortion by judgment, doubt, or mockery from those who don't share the vision. They know that when a dream is still young, it is easily shaken by unnecessary reactions, a passing insult, a skeptical look, or a question like, "Is that even realistic?" Any of these can plant seeds of doubt and halt a journey before it truly begins. That's why silence becomes a kind of shield, not to hide the dream, but to nurture it. Keeping a dream to oneself doesn't mean avoiding action. On the contrary, the Stoic moves every day toward what they seek, but without the need for others to know it. They don't need to prove they have a plan. They don't post progress updates, boast of goals, or crave recognition before the time is right. They let actions carry the dream forward and let it grow through discipline and resolve. In doing so, they remove the risk of becoming dependent on external motivation, a force that's fickle and ultimately unreliable. The Stoic doesn't treat a dream as a map that requires others' approval, but as a personal journey demanding undivided focus. When too many people know about a goal, the mind becomes fragmented, torn by expectations, conflicting advice, or unconscious competition. What begins as an inner calling becomes a public performance, losing its original essence. So the choice to remain quiet isn't just protective. It preserves the dream's true meaning, something born deep within, not a publicity campaign. Some dreams need time before they can be fully understood. They can't always be explained at first, even by the one who carries them. Sharing too early, when the dream is still forming, can lead to misunderstanding, pressure, or even abandonment, because confidence in the dream's value hasn't yet taken root. The Stoic watches patiently as the dream grows, like a seed in the soil. They water it with effort, with discipline, with uncaring intellect, not with the spotlight of public opinion. Not every dream needs an audience. Some become stronger, more sacred, and more real when kept to oneself. The Stoic doesn't seek admiration to validate a dream's worth. They trust that when the moment is ripe, it will be the result, not the promise, that speaks. And when that time comes, today's silence will have become the solid foundation for tomorrow's achievement. 5. Personal emotions are waves. Don't set sail in a storm. Emotions are among the deepest and most complex layers of the human psyche. They arrive swiftly, leave unexpectedly, and sometimes leave behind lasting consequences. In today's world, where expressing emotion instantly and publicly is encouraged, inner restraint is often misunderstood as weakness, pretense, or lack of authenticity. Yet in Stoic philosophy, mastering emotion does not mean repressing or denying it. It is a deliberate and purposeful act. The art of observing without being swept away, the ability to delay reaction and replace it with reflection. The Stoic is not numb. They experience pain, joy, anger, and loneliness just like anyone else. But they don't allow those emotions to govern their behavior, speech, or decisions. They believe emotion should be fully felt internally before it's expressed, if it ever needs to be expressed at all. In most cases, withholding emotion is not about hiding it, but about studying it. Only when the emotional tide has settled can one distinguish between a fleeting reaction and a meaningful signal for action. The Stoics does not chase emotion. They walk beside it like a companion they understand, but never hand the reins to. Reacting impulsively from emotion often leads to unintended damage. A word spoken in anger, a move made in fear, or a decision taken in confusion can leave lasting cracks in relationships and in one's sense of self. The Stoic sees emotion as waves. To dive in at their peak is to risk being pulled under, but to watch, wait, and swim when the water calms, that is wisdom. Silence during emotional surges is the choice of someone who knows every reaction carries consequences, and in that stillness, they are not passive. They are watching, analyzing, asking, where did this feeling come from? Does it deserve to be expressed? And if so, when, where, and with whom? The Stoic turns to writing, reflection, and meditation as tools to process emotion inwardly. They create space between themselves and the storm, not to suppress the feeling, but to ensure that every response comes from clarity, not impulse. Marcus Aurelius, a ruler and Stoic philosopher, penned deeply emotional journal entries, not to announce them to the world, but to converse with himself or self. His writings weren't crafted to impress. They were a method of keeping his mind clear, free from emotional dominance. Writing for him was not about expression. It was about understanding, and only through understanding can one gain control. To the Stoic, emotion is not something to eliminate, but something to train. Like a wild horse, it can take you far if guided, or plunge you into ruin if left unchecked. The Stoic does not fear emotion. They simply refuse to let it lead. They honor it as a meaningful signal, but never treat it as ultimate truth. Through inner calm and careful observation, the Stoic cultivates a unique strength, the strength to understand without display, the strength to respond selectively, and above all, the strength of self-command, the force that keeps one from losing themselves in the most vulnerable moments. 6. Silent battles. No one needs to know what you're fighting. As long as you don't quit. There are battles without gunfire, without visible wounds, without any audience. And yet they unfold quietly, within the mind of every person. These are the moments when one faces loneliness, confusion, the weight of failure, the quiet doubt in oneself, or the pressure of unspoken expectations. These battles aren't made public, don't call for cheerleaders, and don't come with medals, but they are where character is forged. The Stoic understands that most of what wears us down doesn't come from the outside world, but from the unending dialogue within. Not everyone deserves to know what you're going through, not because secrecy is sacred, but because pain, failure, and wounds, if exposed at the wrong time, to the wrong people, may not be healed, but judged or exploited. In Stoic thought, silence isn't avoidance. It's a deliberate act of preserving inner strength from being scattered. A fragile mind, opened too early, can be swept away by conflicting opinions, misguided sympathy, or false expectations, none of which truly help. The Stoic does not seek sympathy for what they're enduring. They don't need an audience for their unhealed wounds. They treat their darkest moments as training grounds, quiet ones, like a fighter training in the night. Unseen and unsung, each strike, each fall, each rising again, is a slow accumulation of inner power. Resilience doesn't always show on the outside. In fact, it's often forged in silence, where there is no applause, no recognition, just perseverance and an unyielding will. One reason the Stoic chooses to guard their inner struggle is because they know exposure can sometimes wound more than it heals. When a person isn't yet strong enough to stand on their own, and they make their pain public too soon, they risk becoming dependent on others' reactions, both good and bad. Praise may inflate illusion, while criticism deepens the hurt. The Stoic understands that if healing doesn't begin within, no comfort from the outside will ever be enough. Silence does not mean numbness. The Stoic still feels pain, still worries, still wrestles like anyone else, but they train themselves to observe, to accept, to walk beside emotion rather than be led by it. They fight, but don't necessarily share. They endure, but don't ask to be understood. And in that quiet, they build an unshakable, the foundation of self-mastery, of steel will, of deep self-knowledge that needs no explanation. There are battles that no one will ever know about, except the one who fights them. But that doesn't make them any less real. In truth, these silent battles are where a person is truly shaped, not under the lights of a stage, but in the shadows of solitude, not with grand declarations, but with quiet, repeated action, not through others witnessing, but through loyalty to oneself. 7. Planning for the future. Silence is the armor that shields a dream from what you have yet to understand. When someone begins to map out their future, it's not merely about picturing a destination. It's a full reorientation of the self. Every plan, whether big or small, is a quiet commitment to a direction one wants to pursue. But from a Stoic perspective, sharing plans too early often brings more harm than benefit. Instead of fueling motivation, it can drain it, fracture focuses, and turn something deeply personal into a target for gossip, judgment, or even opposition. The Stoic knows a plan holds power only while it remains within the bounds of inner control. Once it's brought into the open too soon, it ceases to be fully one's own. Keeping a plan to oneself isn't born from fear of failure, but from a clear awareness that what isn't fully formed should not yet be exposed. A plant in its early stage is like a seedling. It needs careful tending, protected from external storms. Every opinion, expectation, or doubt from others, however well-meaning, can distort one's path or weaken the original intent. The Stoic chooses silence not to avoid responsibility, but to guard focus. They understand that the path to something meaningful demands consistency, and consistency only survives when undisturbed by outside noise. One of Stoicism's core values is distinguishing what's within our control and what is not. In the context of future planning, the Stoic focuses on what can be done now. Each concrete step, each disciplined day, every small action that signals commitment. They don't get lost in visions of the end result, nor do they seek confirmation or applause for their path. They don't need approval, because if the path is right, the outcome will speak for itself. Keeping plans private also helps reduce unnecessary pressure. When a goal is announced too soon, one unintentionally creates expectations, both from others and from themselves. What was once a tool for growth becomes a burden to prove. The Stoic avoids this by letting plans serve personal development, not ego, not comparison, not performance. They understand that sustained focus can only exist when the goal remains in quiet space, free from scrutiny, competition, or doubt. In today's world, declaring your plan is often mistaken for progress, a gesture of success mindset. But the Stoic sees value not in proclamation, but in execution. A strong plan doesn't need to be posted on a wall or broadcast to the world. It needs to be lived, day after day, with precision and discipline. When one pours all their energy into action, there's no room left for showmanship. And when the result arrives, it won't need to be explained, because real transformation is always clearest when it doesn't need to justify itself. The Stoic also accepts that plans may change, not because they lack resolve, but because they're humble enough to adapt to reality, and because they haven't shared too much too soon. They retain flexibility. They are not trapped by public promises or bound by expectant eyes. This gives them the freedom to pivot, adjust, or change course intuitively, without losing the integrity of the journey. Like a ship at sea, only the one at the helm knows when to shift direction, slow down, or accelerate, as long as they don't surrender the wheel to expectations that do not belong to them. 8. Weakness and wounds. Everyone has cracks within, but not everyone needs to know where they are. Every person carries hidden wounds, vulnerable spots unseen by others. These may be painful memories, unresolved failures, flaws in character, or limits we quietly struggle to overcome. These things don't lessen our worth. In fact, they are evidence that growth and learning are still underway. But from a Stoic perspective, acknowledging weakness doesn't mean excusing it, and accepting our wounds doesn't mean placing them under the gaze of others. The Stoic chooses to face their weaknesses privately, not out of fear of judgment, but because they understand the value of guarding fragility with conscious control. When someone reveals their weaknesses too early, they give up control over how others perceive and respond to them. A weakness in the hands of someone who lacks empathy or integrity can become a tool for manipulation, or further injury. The Stoic doesn't conceal out of shame, but out of wisdom. They know that unprocessed wounds shouldn't be made public. Sharing them too soon doesn't ease the pain. It spreads it, uncontained, and lets others define what was once deeply personal. Silence is not avoidance. It's timing. It's choosing when and how healing should happen under the right conditions. Stoicism places great emphasis on autonomy. And when it comes to weakness, autonomy means owning who knows what about you, when, and why. The Stoic doesn't deny they've failed, made mistakes, or suffered, but they only share when it serves a constructive purpose, when they have already regained their footing, absorbed the lesson, and can speak from a place of wisdom, not need. Until then, silence is the essential shield. It creates space to heal undisturbed, to process without distraction, to grow without the noise of external opinion. A weakness, when clearly seen and properly handled, can become the bedrock of real maturity. But if revealed without discernment, it can trap us in the identity of the broken one or the victim, and that dims the light of what we could be. The Stoic avoids this by refusing to let pain define them. They treat it as data, not destiny. They observe it, study it, learn from it, and gradually transform it. And they do it all in silence, without praise for their endurance, without pity for their past. Silence in suffering does not mean suppressing emotion. The Stoic still feels, still aches, still trembles inside, but they preserve those emotions in private space, where they aren't twisted by others' reactions. They know that if emotions are open to others too soon, they can be misunderstood, distorted. A person who hasn't yet healed, but speaks as if they have risks falling into illusion, mistaking language for recovery. That's why the Stoic doesn't share to seek comfort. They live with the wound, watch it change, and only speak when it truly serves, not themselves, but others. To accept a weakness is essential, but to master it, to protect it from misuse, is the highest form of inner strength. The Stoic doesn't deny their first one. They simply don't hand it over until they are truly ready, and in that silence, they keep walking, steady, composed, and deeply in control. 9. Personal achievement. When you truly own something, you no longer need to prove it. In a world where success is measured by engagement, applause, and public recognition, keeping your achievements private can seem counterintuitive. But to the Stoic, success isn't something to showcase. It's the natural result of continuous self-discipline, not a moment in the spotlight. They believe an achievement holds real value only when it's eternalized, when it's acknowledged and respected by the one who earned it, not by the noise of the crowd. Keeping success private doesn't diminish its worth. On the contrary, it protects the achievement from being diluted by expectations, comparison, or unnecessary admiration. The Stoic understands that announcing success too early or too loudly brings unintended consequences. Attention invites pressure to maintain an image, to act for appearances rather than purpose, to preserve status rather than pursue principle. What once was a reward for effort becomes a burden to uphold. The Stoic avoids this by choosing silence. They don't deny their progress, but they let it unfold naturally, without spectacle, without seeking validation. Preserving personal accomplishments within also limits the influence of external forces on one's self-worth. When a person ties their identity to public success, they become dependent on recognition. Every compliment might serve as fleeting motivation, but fades the moment attention shifts. The Stoic does not build confidence on praise, knowing that what comes from others is always unstable. Instead, they cultivate steadiness from within, where success is proof of discipline, patience, and self-understanding. Not a trophy to show, but a step forward in character. This quiet approach also allows the Stoic to maintain humility, a vital trait in the pursuit of wisdom and self-control. Boasting, whether intentional or unconscious, tends to trap people in illusions about themselves, blinding them to their weaknesses and stalling growth. When someone becomes too invested in appearing successful, they fear mistakes because failure might crack the illusion. The Stoic, however, is not bound by image. They allow themselves to err, to restart, to succeed without needing an audience. More importantly, Real achievement doesn't require an audience to be meaningful. A person who learns to regulate emotion, maintain personal discipline, or steady the mind in hardship, that kind of success isn't shown through medals or certificates, but it is the most enduring and valuable kind. The Stoic records this progress for themselves. They don't need others to understand, as long as they know they've grown. And that growth is fueled by self-awareness, not comparison. Achievement in the Stoic view isn't a mountaintop to stand on and look down from. It's a step that helps you climb toward deeper understanding and self-mastery. Every accomplishment isn't a reason to pause and boast, but a cue to keep moving. Because proving you're good isn't the point. Knowing you're improving is. In that silence, they preserve freedom from social pressure, from external validation, and from the temptation to please. That is the foundation of true confidence, the kind that doesn't need applause to endure. 10. The journey of self-development. Maturity speaks loudest through what you no longer feel the need to prove. Self-development is a long journey, one without a fixed destination, and one that doesn't require a spotlight. In today's world, where every personal step forward is easily turned into content, the Stoic chooses instead to grow in silence. To them, real transformation is not declared, it's practiced daily, uninterrupted by outside praise, doubt, or expectation. When you share your progress too soon, you not only lose the quiet space needed for self-reflection, but risk being pulled into comparison and the pressure to maintain an image others have assigned to you. The Stoic understands that every individual has their own pace of growth. Inner maturity requires space to settle, to observe, to adjust, free from unsolicited advice and judgmental eyes. When someone publicizes every change, from new habits to mindset shifts, they unintentionally turn their personal evolution into performance. Motivation drifts from internal development to external display. The Stoic avoids this not out of secrecy, but from the recognition that true growth demands absolute honesty with oneself, and such honesty only thrives in private spaces. Personal development is also not a straight upward line. It moves in stages, with progress, setbacks, and periods that feel like standing still. When each step must be made public, it creates pressure to appear constantly improving, even when one might need to pause, recalibrate, or simply rest. The Stoic accepts this rhythm as natural. They feel no need to broadcast their efforts to be validated, nor to prove themselves through immediate results, because growth to them is not something to be proven, but something to be lived. Maintaining silence during growth also protects the will from unnecessary depletion. Every time you share, you invite feedback, and whether praise or critique, it can subtly alter your original path. A compliment can lead to complacency. A criticism can seed doubt. An ill-fitting suggestion can knock you off course. The Stoic knows that clarity of direction demands a reduction of interference, and that clarity is best preserved when development is guarded by deliberate quiet. A core Stoic principle is inward focus, concentrating on what's within your control and letting go of what's not. In the process of self-development, the only controllable variable is your own behavior. What you learn, how you practice, how you respond to failure, and how you rise after falling. These don't need to become public lessons or inspirational posts. They simply need to be integrated into daily life, repeated until they yield real, lasting change that needs no announcement. No one needs to know how you're changing, how fast, or how intensely. What matters is that you are changing in a way that is right for you. The Stoic does not measure progress by the gaze of others, but by changes in how they think, feel, and react. When someone looks inward, and sees that what once made them angry no longer stirs them, or what once caused anxiety is now met with calm. That is the clearest evidence of growth, and that alone, without being said aloud, is more than enough. In daily life, I've found that the most challenging moments are also the ideal grounds for practicing Stoicism. When emotions rise, when I feel uncontent, these are the moments where I must choose to react out of habit or to pause and observe myself. Each morning, I begin not with scrolling the news or social media, but with a few minutes of writing down what I know I can't control today and what I still have power over. That grounds my mind, brings me back to the present, and reminds me that emotions are not commands. They're signals to pay attention to. When facing negative people or unwanted situations, I no longer feel the need to react or prove anything. Instead, I practice silence, respond slowly, and hold my boundaries. Each of these small, unseen actions strengthens a part of my inner will. Stoicism is not easy, and at times it can feel lonely. But it's in that very silence that I feel stronger, clearer, and freer with every decision I make. This is no longer just a philosophy of ancient Greece. It's become the foundation for peace in a chaotic world. If you're still here after everything you've just heard, perhaps there's a quiet call within you, a call to live with more strength, more depth, and more calm amidst the chaos. That is the path Stoicism invites us to walk. Each truth we've uncovered here is not meant to be stored away, but to be practiced, lived, and grown into, day by day, in quiet resolve. If this video resonated with something inside you, let it show by liking, subscribing, and turning on notifications so you won't miss the next one. This isn't just a thank you. It's a step forward, a way to carry this philosophy to others who might need it, just as you once did. I'll see you in the next video.